In the winter of 1959, a group of 10 Russian hikers set out on a trek into the Russian Ural mountain range. With years of advanced hiking experience and youthful exuberance by their side, the trip was regarded as challenging but doable. What resulted, however, was nothing of the sort. 9 dead hikers with mysterious causes of death, delayed search efforts, and ultimately many mysteries as to what happened on the trip. Theories concerning what happened to the hikers emerged, ranging from seemingly insane to somewhat plausible, such as murderous escaped prison guards, CIA involvement, and secret weapons testing disasters, to a brutal force of nature in the form of an avalanche. Despite the numerous theories, to this date, no one can truly say how those 9 hikers perished. Today, we'll review the Dyatlov Pass Incident of 1959. In 1959, Russia had been experiencing a period known as the Thaw, where culture, education, and writing could breathe again under the lifting weight of Stalin-era practices. Khrushchev had assumed power following Stalin's death in 1953, and young Russians felt empowered in their pursuit of education, the arts, and the outdoors. Perhaps this is what motivated the 9 students at the Ural Polytechnic Institute to undertake such a daring adventure. The idea for and planning of the hike were handled by one student, 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, who was studying radio engineering at the UPI. Igor always had a fondness for technology, nature, and photography, and looked for the enjoyment in life. Despite his childlike ambitions, however, Igor was regarded by the group as a totalitarian type of leader, meaning he made virtually all decisions. Because of this, they meticulously planned for their trip into the unforgiving Russian wilderness, including bringing ample food, warm clothing, and an approved hiking route. He, alongside the other 8 student hikers, had extensive outdoors experience, with their intended trip being the last hurdle in their journey to becoming Level 3 hikers, the highest certification in Russia at the time. Regardless of their experience and planning, the trip did raise some concerns among family members of the hikers, one such person being Igor Dyatlov's mother, who, when expressing her concern over the trip interfering with Igor's upcoming exams, was simply met with, "Mom, this is my last trip." So, with that, on the morning of January 23, 1959, the hikers set off from the town of Sverdlovsk, now known as Ekaterinburg. From there, the hikers would arrive the following day in the iron and steel manufacturing town of Serov, where, while waiting for their next departing train to Ivdel, they would captivate a class of school children with their stories of hiking and adventure. This give-forward attitude was shared by the whole group, adding an emphasis to the tragic events that would later occur. That evening, the group departed for Ivdel, where they would catch the bus to Vizhay. While in Vizhay, they would encounter another hiking group from the UPI, the Blinov group, who they would spend some time with before ultimately parting ways. This encounter would be the last time the Dyatlov and Blinov groups would see one another. And upon saying their goodbyes, the Dyatlov group continued to the 41st settlement on the 26th of January, and the 2nd North settlement on the 27th. By this time, however, one of the student hikers, Yuri Yudin, had been experiencing some medical complications as a result of a sciatica flare-up and was going to return home. Although disappointed by their comrades' early departure from the trip, they continued on, and unbeknown to Yuri Yudin, that would be the last time that he saw his friends alive. Following Yuri's departure, on the 28th and 29th of January, the group made their way to the Lozva and then Auspia rivers. On the night of the 30th, the hikers assessed the difficulty of the route ahead of them and determined that they must spend another night by the riverbank. The next morning, they follow a Mansi hunter, a local indigenous tribe that occupies part of the Urals, along what looks to them like the best route through. And after a strenuous day of hiking, the group set up camp for the night somewhere south in the Auspia Valley. Now, up until this point, understanding the movements and behaviors of the hikers was quite straightforward thanks to group and individual diaries that were kept. However, January 31st, 1959 marks the last journal entry recorded among any of the hikers, and from this point, experts have had to piece together what they believe to be the rest of the story. From investigation and collective evidence after the fact, it is proposed that the Dyatlov group set their tent down on February 1st, 1959, 10 miles from their intended destination of Mount Otorten. For nearly the next 2 weeks, anyone with a vested interest on the hikers' trip merely assumed all was going according to plan and that they would hear from them upon their return on February 13th. With no word from any of the hikers come their return date, family members started expressing concerns to administrators at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Following the concerns raised, head of the sports club at UPI, Lev Gordo, falsely informed the parents that the Dyatlov group had sent a telegram detailing their delay when no such event had occurred. He believed that because the Blinov group noted a winter storm in the area that the Dyatlov group would be hiking, their late return was nothing to worry about. It was assumed that the Dyatlov group was simply camped out somewhere to ride out the storm. Finally, on February 17th, continuing pressure from the families prompted school officials to send a telegram to Vizhay, the village that the Dyatlov group would be traveling from, to inquire about the hikers. The following day, a telegram was received back stating that the Dyatlov group did not return. And with that, a search party was sent out on the 19th of February, 1959. Their first roadblock was the realization that the group's approved hiking route was nowhere to be found by the sports committee at Sverdlovsk. This means that either the Dyatlov group did not submit a route, or the route was lost. This left the search party nothing to work with except for the fact that the group was heading north. In the following days, rescuers searched the surrounding areas and contacted any individuals with information on the hikers' last known whereabouts. Of those individuals, Yevgeny Meslenikov, a distinguished alumnus of the UPI, informed search officials that he personally signed off on Igor Dyatlov's proposed route into the Urals. This would give them some direction to take the search. With the gained knowledge of the group's route, on the 21st of February, rescuers Gordo and Blinov visit a Mansi village, the Body Yarova clan, and learn the hikers were estimated to be there several weeks prior to enjoy tea and continue on their travels. The only remaining evidence of the hikers' time at the village was a set of Mansi sled tracks, a common gesture from the Mansi people when sending off guests, that, again, indicated they were traveling north. After nearly a week of searching, the last tent placed down by the hikers was discovered, partially collapsed in on itself and slashed open from the inside. Outside of the tent, rescuers found an ice axe and a dead flashlight left in the on position. Inside of the tent, the search parties met with a confusing scene. Nicely folded clothes, ski boots neatly arranged next to one another, and a plate of food seemingly ready to be eaten. If not for knowing the circumstances, a reasonable person might assume that the hikers were out exploring the area and would return shortly. Not long after discovering the tent, the first two bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, are found several hundred yards away. They are in merely their underwear, and one of them appears to have had their eyes and mouth ravaged by an animal. The next two bodies found were those of Zinaida Kolmogorova and Igor Dyatlov. Their bodies were located in a different area than the first two. However, the location of both groups' bodies indicates that they were attempting to make their way back to the tent. Finally, the body of Rustam Slobodin is found somewhat near the first groups, and for the next few months, these would be the only bodies discovered. It was not until snow cover decreased in May when a Mansi hunter came along an ice cave containing the remaining 4 hikers' bodies. The following investigation of the hikers' bodies only proved to raise more questions about this case, owing to the differing locations of the hikers' bodies, the discovery of varying causes of death, bizarre bodily injuries, and trace radiation found on their clothing. Specifically, all 9 hikers were found to have died as a result of hypothermia. Of the final 4 found, however, 3 of them presented with bone-related injuries, 2 having crushed chests and broken ribs, and 1's skull being bashed in, leaving bone fragments in his brain. As noted previously, numerous theories have emerged regarding what could have happened to the hikers. When interviewed years later about the event, Yuri Yudin, the sole survivor, attributes their deaths to a sinister cause, considering their murder by Russian soldiers. This is supported by radiation found on the clothes of 2 of the hikers. It was believed that they may have witnessed a secret weapons test, which was not uncommon during this period of the Cold War, and were killed for it. This theory is not widely accepted, however, because the radiation on their clothing could have been incidental to a nuclear event that had occurred 2 years prior to the hike. One of the hikers lived in the contaminated area, and another assisted with the cleanup, which would explain the trace radiation found on their clothing. It is important to note, though, that along with the reluctancy of school officials to begin a search and the hikers' approved route going missing at the hiking commission, this theory of a high-level conspiracy does become enticing. Another compelling theory, although a bit far-fetched, is that of Western intelligence involvement. That is, that the CIA murdered the hikers. It was not uncommon at the time for the Russians to fool the Western world by leaving materials ridden with radiation in non-affected areas so as to throw them off. So, it is theorized that a few of the members were hired by the KGB to do exactly that: deliver fake radioactive clothing to CIA agents in Russia and photograph them. When considering the fact that 2 of the individuals, Alexander Kolevatov and Yuri Krivonishenko, worked in top-secret atomic laboratories years prior, it does not seem completely unlikely. It is proposed that on February 1, 1959, the KGB hired hikers attempted to meet with the CIA, but something went wrong and the CIA agents tortured and killed the entire group. The final, and perhaps most accepted theory that I would like to cover is that of the slab avalanche theory. This idea posits that while the hikers slept at night, a smaller-scale slab avalanche occurred, where a slab of snow at the surface breaks from deeper snow layers, resulting in chunks of falling snow that ultimately collapsed onto the hikers. It is believed that they then cut open their tent and fled to find other shelter. From a complex digital analysis, researchers were able to conclude that, although not the ideal angle for an avalanche to occur, it was possible. Along with that, the injuries sustained by the hikers were accepted as possible under the slab avalanche theory because of their sleeping position and the severity of the hypothesized avalanche. When considering the fact that the tent was cut from the inside and that there was a flashlight left in the on position, it seems very plausible that something forced them out of the tent quickly during the night. From the Dyatlov website archive, there are at least 28 different proposed theories as to what happened to the hikers, and while some of them may be more plausible than others, the shroud of mystery surrounding this case has prevented even the most determined individuals from getting an answer. Today, with none of the remaining hikers alive, and affected family members slowly dwindling, gaining more evidence and insight into the case is nearing impossibility. Personally, after reviewing details of this event, I cannot pick the best theory. They each have their compelling parts and not so compelling parts, and it leaves room for much interpretation of the evidence. I've provided sources describing the event in the description below and encourage you to decide for yourself what happened to the Dyatlov group.